we're done with the intro as far as me pretending like I don't know what I'm doing, because that's how we used to start these things. I had no idea what this was going to turn into 31 episodes ago. Now we are on episode 32. My name is Kevin Sullivan. I'm attorney Kevin, and we have an incredible guest today. I am so hyped. I can't even put the words together how happy we are to have you, Kevin Harrington.
Hey,
thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, two Kevins. We got to get a thing going on here.
We're gonna have a good time. So,
attorney Kevin, entrepreneur Kevin.
A lot of moving parts with both of us, to say the least. So, I wrote down some notes. Obviously, I do some research on my guests, and you have, an incredible background, incredible, biography. So, author, entrepreneur, educator, shark, over $5 billion in global sales, if I'm saying that correctly. Founder of As Seen on TV. You're a mentor now, obviously helping entrepreneurs. It's an entrepreneur organization. Is that what it's called?
EO was in 1987. I was a young entrepreneur, and I was hanging out with a couple of guys, Michael Dell from Dell Computers, or Ted Leonsis, who owns the Washington Capitals and the Wizards and big sports empire. And none of us really had any real money at the time, but we were entrepreneurs making mistakes, doing some good things. And we said, we should form an organization to help other entrepreneurs. So we started EO and 1987, 501c3. And we have now, fast forward, it's the largest entrepreneurial organization in the world. We're in 55 countries, 160 cities around the world. So chapters in 160 cities. And there's a big chapter here in Tampa, where I'm from, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, etc., all over the U.S. But it's an awesome organization, because if you're an entrepreneur and you join EO, you get like a board of advisors. It's called a forum, and so many, many great things happen there. They have monthly connections and monthly events and quarterly global events, and EO has been a great organization.
It's incredible. And to kind of talk about a little bit the philanthropy, it looks like you were on the board at USF for the entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And then also to give back to Moffitt, which, is very near and dear to my heart with my father. So thank you so much for that.
You bet.
And a lot of incredible things. So
I was also on the UT's board for about 5 years, the entrepreneurship program there. Dr. Rebecca White runs an awesome program at UT. I love giving back. And speaking about philanthropy, I also do have my own foundation. It's the Harrington Family Foundation. And we've been putting on events, and also we are giving back to the young entrepreneurs in the world. In fact, we started here in Tampa with Junior Achievement, and we built an entrepreneurship hub at JA. And in the last 12 months, over 27,000 high school students have gone through the Kevin Harrington Entrepreneurship Hub at JA here in Tampa. So really cool stuff going on. It had some good success over the years, ups and downs along the way. We could talk about some of that, but I'm in the mode of giving back in the final years of my time on this earth. Okay,
I get it, and I'm just going to dive right into it. So obviously, between and Shark Tank, I want to, I don't want to minimize your time there, but that's only a small, if people really understood and kind of deep dived into you, that's only a small part of your life. I mean, you have been an entrepreneur since it sounded like your college days. I saw you start an HVAC company, things like that.
Yes.
Kind of went into, As Seen on TV.
Right. Yeah. So, I'm one of 6 kids out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm the fourth. By the time, and my father was in the bar restaurant business. And so when it came time for me to go to high school, he said, Kevin, the bar business is tough. Your older brothers and sisters, we took care of their schooling and their high school and their college, but it's a tough world. You're going to have to pay for your own high school, which fortunately wasn't crazy, outrageous expensive, but I paid for my own school, but I had to start a business. So I was 15 years old, and when I started my first business, it was driveway sealing back in Cincinnati, Ohio. So knocking on doors and telling people, hey, look, see these cracks in your driveway? Well, when it freezes, the water in there going to triple the size of the cracks. I'll get out there, seal those cracks, beautify your driveway. And I was doing 10 to 15 jobs a week at the age of 15. Wow. So that was my first entrepreneurial. I mean, it was it was so awesome to see, like, I was making $1,000 a week net. And this is now 50 some years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I paid cash for a sports
Well, it's crazy
car.
how good you look at 25.
I paid cash for a sports car when I was 16. And then you mentioned HVAC. When I got to college, the driveway sealing business was a summertime business, and it was plenty of profit to pay for my high school. But to go to college, I had to have tuition, I had to have books, I had to have an apartment, or, I had to stay there. Right. And so much more expensive. And I said, I can't just have a summertime business. I need something year round. And I said, what is something year round? I'm like, heating and air conditioning. Okay. It's like, I just picked it, And so what I was doing, this was the amazing thing. I'm focused on customer acquisition in any business that I start, whether it be a product or as seen on TV. And we can talk about more of this customer acquisition. But here I am, I'm 18 years old, senior in high school, going into my freshman year of college. And I started Tri-State Heating and Cooling. Sounded like a big company. But what I did is I went to the courthouse and I got every new homeowner transaction in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I said, if you just bought a house.
How did you even think of this at 18?
That's
amazing.
You got to think, what's the best way to
differentiate?
How do you get new customers?
Yeah.
Well, if you just bought a new house, number one, you got great credit. Okay.
Yeah.
Number two, you're most likely going to want to do a lot of improvements to that house. And so while I was in college, we had telemarketers calling every new homeowner, hey, congratulations on the purchase of your house. We have a special gift for you. We're going to come out and show you how to work that furnace that you've got, because it can be a dangerous appliance with carbon monoxide and the flue and the vents and all that. But also, we'll clean that furnace free of charge. It's a welcome gift to the neighborhood. Everyone's like, when can you be here? Well, so my guys would go out while I'm in school. I'd come to the office at 2:00 in the afternoon, and we were getting into 20 doors a day. Oh, Mrs. Smith wants a new furnace. Mr. Jones wants central air conditioning. This one wants an electrostatic air cleaner, humidifier, and this or that. So I did all the calls at night, closed the deals. We went from zero, and this is 1976, from zero to $1 million in sales in 1 year. Now, the equivalent of that today would be like going 0 to 5 million. We had 25 employees. At the end of 1 year, I had 5 trucks going out every day. And of course, then I'm still going to school. I got 5 trucks going out every day. I'm like, what am I going to do? And in about my second year of college, I said, that's it.
Yeah.
I said, do I want to be an entrepreneur, or do I care about a degree? Right. Well, the funny thing is, in today's world, my son, he's 37 years old. He said, Dad, I know you went the entrepreneur route. I'm going to go to Penn State. I'm going to get a degree, and I'm going to, go the corporate route. So I said, great, good luck. And he did, graduated, and he couldn't find a job. Okay. So I'm like, hey, that degree, good luck, man. And so What did he do? He came to work for the family business. Okay. I've been with me for 17 years, but my other son he went to college for a little bit. And just said the heck with it. But I'm not saying don't go to college. It actually was very good for my oldest boy, Brian Harrington. He's now the CEO of my company, because as I get older, I'm kind of turning things over, and I have myself and my brother, myself and my son, my brother, who's 10 years younger than me, and his daughter, she's 32. So it's myself and my brother and our 2 kids, and the 4 of us are building an awesome company together. And it's sort of like, at some point, I'll be completely retired. Right now, and I use the word semi-retired, but I'm still working 60 hours a week.
We were talking about that lunch a couple years ago.
Exactly.
So just to reiterate on the college things, and I've talked about that a couple of times in the podcast. I went to law school. Sat on a college board, still very involved. And at the end of the day, if you go to college because there's something you want to do, or something you want to seek the degree for, you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, things like that. You know,
pretty tough to be a lawyer without a degree.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's one thing. If you're going to college to find yourself, or you're going to college because you think it's just
Yeah.
right thing to do,
Yeah.
may want to take a second guess at that. So
That's my belief, especially if you have, if you have any kind of entrepreneurial beliefs. And I'll tell you what's happening right now in the world. AI is changing the world, and it's changing the world on a lot of these entry-level positions. And so a lot of the college kids that are coming out, they're going to be out looking for jobs that previously places were hiring these kids coming out of college. Now they're using AI. So the world of entrepreneurship is more important than ever before for some of these kids coming out of college, because they may find, just like my son, and my son went to Penn State, graduated 17 years ago, and he couldn't find a job. He and they had people on campus and this and that. And, he finally, I really wanted him to get something. So he ended up selling cell phones for Sprint for a little bit before he came into the family business. But he was very quick to say, Dad, this is not for me. Yeah. I want to be in the entrepreneurial business. And he has greatly succeeded in that position now.
Well, I want to dive into, what an incredible story from where you started to where you came from. And a lot of it just, it's hustle. You were grinding back then. How many people, I can't tell you how many people on one hand that I went to school with that was going to school and then working a job. It just wasn't a normal thing. So want to go into the questions. You receive a lot of on-the-spot pitches or quick pitches, whether it's, at the Shark Retreat, which we'll talk about a little bit more, Shark Tank, in your businesses, things like that. When you're receiving a pitch, what would you call as a red flag from the offset? That's like, yeah, this is not a good fit for me.
Yeah. So there's a lot of red flags, but somebody will come out and they'll say, okay, I've got a beauty product, and the beauty industry for face creams, it's a $10 billion industry. And if I just get 1% of that industry, okay, how easy is that? Just 1%. I'm gonna be, I don't know what is that? $100 million, right? So they're just making an assumption that, okay, big industry, 1%, I'm guaranteed 100 million. So there's no grounds for that at all. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how big the industry is. It's what is your plan to attack that industry, and how are you going to get customers, right? So what I want to see is a customer acquisition marketing plan. If you can, now the bigger the industry, maybe the more opportunity, okay? But that also means more competition, bigger companies. You're competing against the L'Oreals of the world. So how are you as a startup going to compete against them and get customers away from them? You've got to have a pretty unique product, some good branding, et cetera. So that I just, when someone makes that, they're trying to get the investor that they're pitching to say, oh, big industry, 1%. Oh, that's a lock. Anyone could get 1%, right? No. You may get 0.0001% of the market, which might be $100,000 in sales, not 100 million, because it's all about putting a plan together and getting the right team to help execute.
I would say, or my other question with that, I would say one of the biggest concerns too is scalability. If you have a product that is such a niche product that can only do, $1 million sounds like a lot of money, and I definitely don't want to minimize that to the audience. But if they're the last 5 years, they've only sold $1 million, and there's only 1,000 people out there that are only interested in that product, with the market cap of it, it's like,
yes,
look, you can't even take on an investor. How can I help you?
Exactly. That's also a red flag. Another one, I'm on Shark Tank. Someone comes out, they need $100,000 and they're going to give up 20% of their company. So I say, okay, what's the use of proceeds of the 100,000? I write you a check for 100,000. Where do you spend that money? Oh, well, I'm going to buy office furniture. I'm going to buy copy machines. I'm going to do leasehold improvements and all of that. And so, okay, so now how much did that cost? Well, that's 100,000. I'm like, okay, so now you're ready to open the doors? Yes, great. Well, what about marketing? Do you have a marketing budget? Oh no, well, you're the shark. Aren't you going to do the marketing? I'm like, no, you're asking for the money to build your business. I'm going to be an investor, but I'm not running the business. Do you need 50,000 for marketing?
That's probably a large common misunderstanding that people are, when I bring on a shark, like, that's all I need. And then it's champagne falls from the sky.
Yeah. They think they hit the lottery.
Yeah.
I did a deal. I gave a person $500,000 for 50% of their company. And 6 months later, they closed the doors. And what did they do? They blamed me. They said the shark didn't help me enough. And the shark didn't give me the second 500,000 that I needed to build the business. And I'm like, this is because the person said, look, I'm in trouble. I need another $500,000. And I'm like, wait a minute. You telling me you went through 500 in 6 months and you want me to write you a check for another $500,000? Well, you said you said there may be more money available. Yeah, if you do well, not if you just run through it and blow it.
Purchase orders, things like that, et cetera, et cetera.
And so, there's just so many mistakes people make. And it's all about, again, I get back to, because in the world of As Seen on TV, we're selling Tony Little Fitness or George Foreman or Jack LaLanne and the Juicer. It's all about customer acquisition. If you can't acquire the customer at the right price, you're gonna max out at $1 million instead of 300 million, right? With Tony Little, we were able to get a customer acquisition cost that fit our profile, and then we could run it to the moon and do hundreds of millions of dollars in sales on each of the campaigns. We did about 8 or 10 infomercials with Tony Little, and over the span of 10 or 12 years, over $1 billion in sales with one guy for multiple shows that worked.
Is that crazy I guess you've done it so many times. Is that crazy to talk like billions of dollars in sales? I mean, you need to,
it's what's crazy, is there's, can I see your sales?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You got to tell this.
Well,
story.
I had to bring one. Yeah.
So when I got a phone call 12 years ago to join this board, and it was a startup, and I was going to be one of 5 board members to start the company. And they had a great clinical study, and that this, drink 1 can of this and you're going to burn 140 calories. Okay. But that's still how we're going to get customers, right? So we started in gyms, Gold's Gym, and it was a little public company, 10-cent stock. But when we started this company, it had a couple $1 million valuation on the stock market. It was a pink sheet stock, 10 cents, and it went to 22 cents. Like, it just doubled. Okay. But it was still worth a couple $1 million, right? Well, we said to ourselves, we can make this $1 billion company. Well, guess what? We're now in over 400,000 locations around the world, and it's a $13 billion company. So, because
we're probably responsible for 12 billion.
There you go. I mean, and there's a lesson to learn on a lot of this, because people say to me, what are some of the things you learned in doing the products that you did? When we did the Tony Little Gazelle, we would call the people. We did outbound telemarketing. See if we could sell something else. We call the people and we say, how do you like that Gazelle? This is 30 days after we shipped it. Oh, I'm going to use it someday. It's still in the box. It's under my bed. But call me in a month because I think I'll get to it, right? Well, then they use it a couple times. Then what do? It becomes a clothes hanger for their clothes, right? And you call them a month later. Well, I'm not using it, and I don't need anything else. They certainly don't need another Gazelle. Celsius, you start on that. How long you been drinking it?
Oh God, a couple of years.
12 years for me.
Yeah,
almost every single day. It's called continuity.
Yeah.
And so in today's world, there's a whole trend towards subscription revenue. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you drive down, I live over in St. Pete, and I drive down 4th Street and I see a new car wash here, about a half mile up the road, another new car wash there. Go a mile up the road, there's 3 or 4 car washes within 2 miles. And what are they all doing? They don't even open the doors until they have 300 to 500 customers who have signed up for a monthly subscription, because they're not waiting for someone to come through for a $5 car wash and come once or twice a month and get $10. No, you sign. If they can get 500 people to sign up for a $99 a month subscription, you got 500 times 100, you got a $50,000 a month guarantee. That covers all your overheads, because it's very low overhead, because you don't need a lot of employees. And now you're in for $20,000 a month profit and before you even start building the business. So subscription revenue is important. And that's why consumption, products that you consume, whether it be skincare, drinks, etc., that's where the real money is ultimately made over products that are one shot, that after they take the one shot, they're done. They don't need anything else.
I completely understand. So is that what your model is kind of transitioned to? Do you find yourself kind of more when you're taking these pitches looking for more of your niches, or is it just, hey, if I can make money, then, how does that analysis go?
We still do products that are one shot. But for example, a gentleman came to us, he's a plumber, and he had this toilet product that was miraculous in what it did, for the toilet, but it was a one-time sale and it sold for $29. Sell it and you're done. Well, and then what he said is, you buy this, and then the tablets that you buy, you put it into my unit. And we're like, hey,
there we go.
You got to sell tablets. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to sell. So he went from having an average order of $29 for the product to people signing up for a monthly subscription to the tablets. So what we try to do, and even like if we do something with the Tony Little, we're going to try to put you on some vitamins or some thermogenic gut busters or something, right? We always look for something that could be subscription or continuity. And in fact, we just invested in a new liquor company that has a very unique product, and we're crushing it with this product, because if people like it, they're going to keep consuming it, and consumption, just like Celsius, that's what builds a big business over. Think about it this way: why did what's the company that sells the fitness bike?
I can't think of Peloton.
Peloton.
Yeah.
Peloton. After they sold a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? What do people need from there? That's why they went up and they went down. There are some subscriptions they can sell to certain programs or whatever, but at the end of the day, their big hit for the $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 piece of equipment, you're done.
Yeah.
I mean, you're really, because this is the problem. Most people don't continue to use it. So why, after they spent $5,000 for a piece of equipment, they're going to then say, well, I'm not using it. Why should I give them a monthly fee for something I'm not even using, right? So versus a product that you consume every day.
I get exactly what you're saying. With it, so obviously we've talked about a ton of moving parts, but so many different organizations that you belong to or manage, et cetera, invest in. How do you manage your time? How do you all the balls?
I'll say this. It's I believe in the old days, I used to kind of have to do everything. Because, when I first started my first business, it was myself. I had a younger brother, he's 9 years younger than me. And we had, I'll never forget, we had rented, we found an office space. It was 6,000 square feet. And it had it had desks, furniture, computers, phones. The company had gone bankrupt, just walked out overnight, left everything, pictures on the wall, name tags on the door. So it was me and my brother, and we hired an assistant. And so when we were interviewing her, she said, where is everybody? So, we open next Monday, So, when we opened, it was just the two of us and her, okay? Because we didn't have a lot of overhead. We were doing everything. We were producing the shows. We were buying the media. We were in the early days of creating infomercials. And I'll never forget that this girl started on Monday, and around 11:15, she came. She says, I'm a little hungry right now. Is it okay if I go for an early lunch? And my brother said, yeah, no problem. I said, where's she going? Oh, I told her she wanted an early lunch. She said, she's gone.
Yes.
He said, what do you mean? I said, she just quit. I said, and so we called her back. She says, well, I don't know what's going on with this thing. There's nobody in your company. So it's like, but 6 months later, we had about 30 people there.
Oh, wow.
6 months after that, we had not only consumed all 6,000 feet, we had taken 24,000, the whole floor was available. And so we had 100 employees. We went from 0 to $55 million in sales in 12 months. And now at that point, we couldn't do it all ourselves.
Yeah.
In the early days, we did it all. And so I'll say this, and I talk a lot about this in my books and materials, is that if you really want to grow and you really want to be successful, you have to surround yourself with a dream team of experts. Because as we were growing, there was one big thing that I had no experience in. I wasn't a banker. I didn't know how to raise money. I was a marketing guy. I was a salesman. I was a guy that could knock on doors and sell stuff. I was a guy that could create infomercials that sold stuff. But how do you keep the money? How do you make sure that, you're shipping on time and that the operations are right, that the inventories are there, and that you have the capital? Well, we had some very, very big strains along the way. And so until, one day a guy said to me, look, Kevin, you need somebody in the finance operations side big time, because you guys have a growing company that's taken off like crazy, but you're going to lose it all if you don't bring some good people around. So I said, well, what do you think I should do? Is this a mentor that I was using? And he said, I know a guy. He was a bank president. He knows every bank in town. You need to raise capital. Here's a good guy. So I interviewed him, and we had been to banks, this bank, 5 banks. They're all like, you're a startup. You don't have any assets. No, we're not going to lend you any money. This guy came in, put a plan together, and also had to make us more of a legit company when I first interviewed him, the bank president, he says, where's your contract files? Okay. Now, you're a lawyer, so you understand. Every deal we had 15 infomercials running, and we had supposed to have talent contracts and production contracts with the producers, and licensing contracts with the owners of the product and all of that. But half of them were on napkins or handshakes. And he's like, dude, he says, you're not bankable. Okay. Yeah. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? We got 55 million in sales. He's like, yeah, but without contracts, this is a house of cards ready to fall. So he put every deal together. And then we walked into a bank that had not only turned us down, but said, not only no, but hell no. And then they lent us $3 million. So, it's getting the right people at the right time in a business that will help you be successful. And without it, some people are going to fail.
With all of that success, a lot of the stories that you told me are very like, 0 to, what's equivalent to 5 million when you had the HVAC business. Now, 0 to 55 million within 12 months of doing that. How did you stay grounded? Well, all of that success.
I'll say this. It's, when I got into the world of media and television, that was a very successful world. I mean, we were going to the TV conferences, and there were, the Wheel of Fortune people, the King World guys, Roger and Michael King, they were billionaires, And so I'm like, I'm doing 50 million a year. We're making 5 to 7 million a year in profit. But wow, comparing ourselves to the guys that we're running in the, we're trying to do business with, it was very humbling to be around billionaires when you're a millionaire. Okay. Now it was nice that at a young age, to be a millionaire, but $1 million isn't what it used to be. Okay.
Yeah.
And so,
this is what you were probably in your late 20s?
I was in my 20s. Yeah. And so the funny thing is, people said, how long did it take you to get to $1 million in net worth? I said, about 26 years or so. But then how long did it take you to get to 10? And within 2 years, I was worth 10 million, because it just starts accelerating. So, and even at that point, it was still humbling, because, we were in an industry of big money, and so, yes, we actually were infomercials. They didn't have a great image in the early days. It was like, oh, you guys are the hucksters on TV late night, Well, hey, we're making a lot of money and we're selling good products, hey, Jack LaLanne and his juicer. We get call me a huckster, but that did $300 million in sales. Okay. So, with a great profit, I always, yes, I would look to the other side and see what was on the other side. But, it's the other thing I'll never forget, when I was getting I've been married twice, and, So I had to have a divorce to get to the second wife, and I'm 20 years with my second wife. So
Wonderful.
all is awesome. But my first wife, she's like, we were going through a divorce, and it was about a year after I'd started the business. So she owned a piece of the company with me. And so we're sitting down and with the lawyers and everything. But she said, you made $7 million in profit last year. She said, where's that money? You have offshore bank accounts. I said, no, it's sitting in inventory. It's sitting in prepaid media. She says, I don't care about any of that. Where's the $7 million in profit? I'm like, you don't understand. You run a business, you're investing back in. So we were always cash poor, even though we had profits and we had, we had a $7 million profit.
Yeah, on paper, you look great.
On paper, we look great. But cash in the bank was less than $1 million, because we were always churning on getting more inventories and so. So I was always grounded. And I'll tell you when you get a little bit bigger head, and that's when you have an exit. And so so I had an exit into a pubco, and because I had been financing my businesses out of cash flow and my own profits. I owned 100% of the company, and I put it all back in over and over and over. And to the point where my wife is like thinking I got Swiss bank accounts. No, the Swiss bank account is in inventory. It's sitting in a warehouse, right? But then we sold to a pubco, and the pubco had lines of credit, and they replenished, they bought all that inventory. So I got all my cash for the inventory, got cash for the purchase. Now I had a lump sum sitting in the bank. That was a different experience than being an entrepreneur running a business, financing that business out of cash flow.
It's incredible. You've written, I want to switch gears, and I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but I want to talk about, we talked about lunch. It's a pleasure having lunch with you. I appreciate you taking the time a couple of weeks ago. And we talked about you writing books and being an author. Tell me kind of, going into that subject, when do you think it is the right time for somebody to write a book?
So, this is a great story because you mentioned 5 billion in sales, and we were cranking, doing show after show. At one time, we had Billy Mays on the air, and Tony Little and Jack LaLanne and George Foreman. We did Kim Kardashian's first infomercial and Paris Hilton's first infomercial. Kathy Hilton dealt with Rick Hilton for years for the girls and his wife, and having a lot of fun, meeting a lot of people. And, Rick would say, hey, do you want to go to dinner tonight? We're going to go over to Nobu. And, of course, Nobu is going to join us, so like, wow, this is awesome. Paris Hilton, me, Nobu, and Rick Hilton, right? Yeah. What could be so bad? This is 30 years ago, right? Or 25 years ago when Paris was just getting rolling. But Kathy was one of our big assets. And so it's like, I had made money and done hundreds of commercials. We've done billions of dollars in sales. But when I sold the company, I'm like, okay, now I'm going to do my next thing. What am I going to do? So I said, I'm going to reach out.
Is this when you sold As Seen on TV? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. So I sold As Seen on TV, Inc., AsSeenOnTV.com. We had 2,000 products running in 100 countries and 25 currencies. And so very complex, right? Hundreds of millions of dollars all around the world. And so we sold the company. I'm like, what am I going to do? So like someone said, you know what? You need a mentor. You need to get somebody to give you some real good advice. So I called, the first guy I called was a guy that started ClickFunnels. And I'll think of his name in a second, but he's $1 billion company now. I'll think of his name here in a second, but he says, Kevin, he said, you're that As Seen on TV. That's the old news. You got to be doing digital. You got to be doing Facebook and Instagram, now TikTok, and creating funnels. And so I'm like, yeah, but what are you talking about here? Yes. Okay. I understand that. But then he said, he says, you would do very well if you went down. Richard Branson is a cool guy. He's done awesome things over the years. It lives mostly the year in Necker Island, probably for tax advantages because England has such a high tax rate. He's down there more than half the time. So he gets advantageous tax situations, I'm sure. But he said, I can get, I know Richard, I've been down there. He can be a game changer. So I said, hey, I'd love to meet the guy. So boom, boom, boom. Well, next thing I know, I'm down in Necker Island sitting with Richard Branson.
Branson.
And so I'm like, so Richard, we're at party the night before, and he's got his big island. He's got a 120-foot catamaran and we're hanging out, having fun.
Casual.
And yeah. And Richard says, he says, Kevin, he says, you're not drinking. What's that all about? I said, I gave it up. I said, I'm a focused guy, and I'm, like, I don't need that. I'm like, it's midnight and I'm going to wake up feeling great tomorrow. But all these people, they're going to be partying till 3:00 in the morning. So we won't see them till 10. He said,
stopped drinking a year ago. Yeah.
There you go.
Didn't have anything going on. And for those people, I always caveat it, God bless you if you have, but yeah, stopped drinking a year ago. And it was like, it
was a game changer for me. And so Richard said, well, look, let's have breakfast, you and me, tomorrow morning, 7:30, just the two of us. So I meet Richard for breakfast, and he's like, giving me all these accolades. I love that ass scene on TV, that, Billy Mays guy, that Tony Little. And he's, that Tony Little guy says, when you go to a trade show with Tony, what happens? I said, we go to the show. People just love Tony, right? They
got the ponytail.
They attack Tony Little. He said, but that's where you screwed up, Kevin. I said, what do you mean screwed up? We did almost $1 billion at that point. He said, yeah, but you built Tony's brand, but you didn't build your brand. They go to Tony.
How long ago was this?
This was
15 years.
About 14 years.
Yeah, okay.
Right. So I said, wow. I said, yeah, because people are pitching Tony for their new product, not me, because they don't even know who I am. Tony's the face of the
And you said that to me when we were at lunch. You said, what are you doing to build yourself?
Yeah.
And I was like, yes.
Yeah. So I said, so Richard, I said, I get it. Like, I built Tony's brand. I built Billy Mays' brand. I helped build Jack LaLanne and all these people, but they don't know me. So I said, so I should build my brand. Is what you're saying. He said, absolutely. Now, how do I do it, Richard? He said, look, today, let me get you some thoughts, but let's have one more meeting. I'm going to give you a business plan to execute. And you're going to start by writing a book. You go home, write a book, find an author, get a ghostwriter, get it out there, and then make it a bestseller and do radio shows, podcasts, promote the hell out of it, and raise your profile because nobody knows who you are. So, and I said, so what happens from there? Well, as you're writing your book and you're doing your tour, now you're going to start speaking. How many trade shows did you say you go to, Kevin? Oh, I do the houseware show, the hardware show, the fitness show, the beauty show, the golf show, the toy fair. I do 30 trade shows a year. Well, guess what? When you have a book, and my book was called Act Now, How I Turn Ideas into $1 million Products. Guess what? You're going to start speaking on stages because they're going to want you to speak because you've raised your profile, and you're going to tell people how they can build their product into the next $1 million product. And so now I'm speaking at the CES show, keynote, and 300,000 people, and they're promoting me. Come listen to Kevin Harrington. And then I'm at the hardware show speaking, getting paid a fee, houseware, dozens and dozens of speaking engagements that I get on TV. Who's watching? Mark Burnett. He called and said, I want you to come talk to me about my new show, Shark Tank. Okay. So like people say, how did you get on Shark Tank? It was because I decided after meeting with Richard Branson to go promote my brand, to build a brand, and then become a branded entity. And Mark Burnett said, let's go. Went and met him. I did an audition, and the rest is history. I got on the show. And it was all because I executed a plan. And it started with me writing that book. And by the way, when you become an authority in the industry, right? There's a word in authority, author. And how do you become an authority? Write a book, become an author. And now people want you, they're going to pay you to speak, and they're going to listen to you, and they're going to put you on TV shows. Okay. So that's how it all started.
You're often making quick decisions. So, you're getting pitched these things on the spot. Sometimes it's competitive with other investors like, Shark Tank and things like that, where you got to kind of, woo people, we'll call it, and things like that. How do you develop that tool? How do you develop that, quick thinking, quick decision making, and kind of go through that analysis?
It's funny because when Mark Burnett was telling me about the show, Shark Tank, I said, Mark, because he wouldn't tell me over the phone. He said, you got to come out to LA. He said, the show's called Shark Tank. I said, what is it? He says, it's a show. I'm going to tell you when you get here. Can't tell you without a signed NDA and all that. So I'm like, but Mark, you do that show Survivor where you do crazy things to people. What would you do to me on Shark Tank? Okay. Like, you're going to throw me in a Shark Tank or what? And so he said, no, he says, it's a business show. And so when he finally explained it, he said, people, entrepreneurs and inventors, they're going to come out. They get 3 minutes to pitch and you're their idea. And you get 3 minutes to make up your mind whether you're going to invest or not, because there's 4 other sharks competing against you. And the first shark to make the deal gets the deal. I said, Mark, that's what you call a shark? I said, a guy that gets 3 minutes to make up his mind? He said, yeah. He said, I've been a shark for 40 years now, because that's what I do every day. People come to my office. I go to trade shows. They pitch me. I make up instantly in my mind, because at that point, I had done hundreds of infomercials. I knew in fitness, like, for example, in fitness, lady pitches me a product and it's a stationary product that has no movement at all. You don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. You have to have a fitness product, has to have movement to it for it to be a successful product in my world, right? We learned that the hard way. Every product we did with Tony Little that was stationary bombed. But the Gazelle, moving like this, okay, the ab isolator, well, if you were moving and it had magical transformation. So we developed formulas, and I wanted to see magical transformation. So I ended up with a 10-point checklist of things that I looked for. And in my mind, I could run through the 10 things. And if it didn't have 7, 8, or 9 of them, if it only had 2 or 3, I'm out. And I could do that in minutes in my mind. If I saw magical transformation, lots of movement, awesome testimonials, before and afters, demonstrations, it's starting to now look like something I'm going to invest in. So not that everything would hit, but we used to hit on 1 out of 10 in the early days, because we didn't know, will things work or won't they? But once we started getting the track record and success, we could identify these points of success. And if I could get 7 or 8, if it had all 10, let's run for the hills and go for it, man. It's going to be a home run. So yeah, we did kitchen products, we did fitness products, we did beauty products. And one of the big things that resonates in my world, is very visual, are magical transformations. If you can magically transform somebody. In fact, right now, I'm doing a TV commercial with a company called Shark Coatings. Okay. They magically transform your garage. And so I had an old concrete garage with cracks in it and ugly. And my wife's like, hey, I want to get you a new garage floor. And she called Shark Coatings. They come out in one day, magical transformation. It was awesome. And they're crushing it. They're doing 200 garages a week right now. It's a little entrepreneurial startup. And the company's going to the moon. So that's what I look for. And there's a formula for success.
You said 1 out of 10, and that's very interesting.
That was in the old days. Now it's like 1 out of 3.
Yeah. So even with the failures, when we're in calm failures, the products that didn't go as well as maybe you anticipated, things like that. How do you move on from a bad investment mentally? And maybe let's talk about that more in the earlier days. Yeah, I've said right. Obviously, things were more sensitive. Now it's like,
yeah. I was going to say, in the early days, it was devastating because we didn't have a lot of capital. So if we're doing a show, we put our time, effort, and money into it, and we didn't have a lot of money back in the early 80s. And so it was like, we'd spend 3, 4, 5, 6 months doing a project, shooting the show, editing the show, getting the contracts, doing all this stuff. And it would air and bomb. Now, I'll say this, just because the first round doesn't work, doesn't mean it's not going to work. Because we would have, we took shows that we would make some tweaks. And I'll never forget, we did a lot of stuff with Billy Mays. Billy Mays here with OxyClean, right? So we had a show with Billy. It was a saw that counter-rotated. It rotated, had 2 blades, one that went this way and the other that went this way. It could cut right through this desk like a hot knife through butter because it was so powerful with those counter-rotating blades. So when we shot the show and we put the commercial, the 30 minutes together, Billy said, look, this is powerful, this product. I want I want to see the commercial come. The first commercial that's called a CTA. A 30-minute show generally has 3 segments and 3 CTAs. So the question is, do you do the 10-minute, 10-minute, 10-minute? Billy said, I want the first CTA hitting them right off the top.
Call to action for those people.
Call to action, right? Yeah. So
that's basically making the offer. Saying, hey,
this is so powerful. I want to see this first CTA in 8 minutes. And so I said, Billy, it's an expensive product. This thing sells for $159. It's a hand saw. Not everybody needs it, So I said, but we're going to go with your way to begin. But I think we should wait a little longer because, and I'll tell you why. And he's like, well, look, let's go ahead. We ran it. The show did not work. And we were very disappointed because we put big money into this and spent a huge amount of production dollars. And so I said, Billy, it's very simple. I said, I think I've identified the problem. People that are watching the show, they're thinking it looks good in 8 minutes. And now you're trying to sell them. And so when you try to sell somebody, they either buy or they don't buy and they may tune out. But I said, we're missing the most important segment of the show. And that is the analysis of all the other saws on the market. We had shot a 2.5-minute segment where we take a table and we say, look, just so you can put your mind at ease and make a decision, we walked into Home Depot and got all the top saws. And here's this one. It's $300 and something. Great saw. 1 blade. All of them have 1 blade. This one does this. This one doesn't do this. This one. So we basically ruled out every other product in the market, leading to the decision that there's only one product that does what we do, and it's the dual saw, and that is your answer. And we put the CTA at 10 minutes and 30 seconds in instead of 8 minutes. The sales more than doubled. When it became a grand slam, went from 0 to $150 million in sales. So so we don't quit on the first test. We go back and we tweak. And there's this great story. Carl Deichler started a company called Beachbody. Mm-hmm. And he did, one of his infomercials was called P90X. And Carl had worked for me back in, before he ever started Beachbody. He ran we had a couple different entities in the direct response business. And Carl came to me and actually said, hey, Kevin, thanks for, helping me learn a new industry, this infomercial world, but I'm going to start my own company because you're doing that Tony Little guy. And Tony, he's like, he doesn't have a beautiful body. He's kind of a big, stocky guy. And I want to do something where people have, they want to have that beach body, right? And so he offered me a piece of the deal if I put up a lot of money. And I said, look, good luck to you. And he went off on his own. And that became $1 billion company, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the one that got away from me. But Carl tells the story. His first test of P90X failed. And his second test failed. The third test failed. He had 18 versions of that show before it worked. Because he had invested so much time and money into that project that he couldn't let it go. And so we always try over and over. At some point, you got to move on to the next. And so it's because we had lots of deal flow. We were shooting 50 infomercials a year. So one a week. We couldn't spend 18 tries on everything we did. But if we were close, we would tweak it to try to get it to work. So we didn't give up easy on projects.
So if you had to give advice, there's a 14-year-old kid, 15-year-old kid that wants to be an entrepreneur or a young person, what advice would you give them?
What I would say is that, I was fortunate because my dad was an entrepreneur. He owned bars and restaurants, and he fostered and helped me. It was funny that my mom came from banking. Her father, my grandfather, was Fifth Third Bank was based in Cincinnati, Ohio. And he was like number 2 at Fifth Third Bank at one time when Fifth Third had 2 banks. Okay. They're all over the country now. But so she came from banking and she's like, Kevin, your dad owns bars and he struggles. I want you to be like your brother who's working for Gillette. He's corporate, and your sister's married. One married a doctor, one married a lawyer, and you're sealing driveways and doing this HVAC stuff. Like, don't you want to be, a real employee of the company? And I'm like, so my dad's like, you got to be an entrepreneur. So I always had good support from at least one side of the family. My mother, I just took it with a grain of salt that she was just looking out for my best future because, boy, I had a lot of ups and downs along the way. And she capitalized on those downs like, don't you want to get a job now? So no, Mom, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. But the point is that I learned that you have to surround yourself with good people. And so I'll say if you're 14 years old, shadow you're somebody very important, somebody if you can. I mean, if you can, and if you don't ask, you won't get. I mean, I finally, somebody said, Kevin, do you have a board of directors in your company? I'm like, no, it's me and my brother. We make all the decisions. Well, a board can help you bounce ideas and they're going to maybe give you thoughts and they may make some intros. And so we put an advisory board together and I brought on the bank president. I brought on this guy and we brought on a lawyer. And so I believe in today's world, if you're going to, Russell Brunson, by the way, was the name of the guy that started ClickFunnels. I was trying to think of his name. Here I was 50 some years old and had billions of dollars in sales and, had a couple of exits under my belt, a lot of capital and assets in my name. And I'm like, who am I going to? Russell Brunson for advice, right? Tony Robbins, because I've worked with Tony Robbins. And who else? Richard Branson, Shadow. Get these people to give you advice, to help. And there was a guy that I was trying to get him to join my advisory board, big shot guy. And I would call his assistant and, hey, can I talk to Carl? Who's this? I'm Kevin Harrington. I'm an entrepreneur. And click, you're not getting through. Okay. So after like a couple of months of trying, so the lady felt sorry for me. She said, look, I'll tell you what, he loves to hang out at a certain bar, with his friends after work sometimes. You might find him there on a Wednesday night, after 6 o'clock, between 6 and 8 o'clock, drinks after work. And, so what did I do? Hung out at that bar, just happened to run into him. My goodness. And he gave me tons of advice and became an advisor. So you got to go for it. And,
what was it like? I'm a big Tony Robbins fan. What was it like talking to Tony?
Tony was awesome, man. So the Greg Ranker is a good friend, and he started Proactive, and he's in a couple exits. One of them, they sold Proactive for $2.2 billion, two partners, $1 billion each. They did. Now, Tony Robbins.
There's work, right?
See, Tony Robbins was a great product for them. But back to what I said earlier, once you bought Tony Robbins' package, that was pretty much it. That's all they had to sell. It's like they gave you the complete everything Tony needs to teach you, the power within or whatever, right? They didn't have anything else to sell. And so it was a bell-shaped curve, up and down. But then I got the rights to all of Guthy Ranker's infomercials for international distribution, because that was the other thing that I did. I had a library and I said, I've got all these investments in infomercials. I got to, what do movies do? Rambo runs in the U.S. They dub it in Germany, and they dub it in Dutch for Holland, and Italian for Italy, and Spanish for Spain. Rambo runs in 100 countries. Can I do that with the Tony Little Gazelle? And we did. And we did more business outside the U.S. than we did inside. But I was running Tony Robbins infomercials all over the world, dubbing it into the foreign languages. And so Tony and I did it, we were in Monte Carlo and doing meetings with all the TV networks that would come to the conferences. And the guy's one of the smartest guys you'll ever meet, by the way. And you talk about, first of all, his brilliance is because he had the people that sought his advice as a mentor were congressmen and billionaires. And so he made so many connections and ended up with so much great deal flow. And because he changed people's lives, people wanted him to be involved in their businesses. In fact, I was just at a trade show at the Tampa Convention Center 2 weeks ago about health, biohacking your health. And there's a big booth, picture of Tony Robbins. Yeah. This is Tony Robbins' new fitness product, right? Because the guy's awesome. And so, yes, he was a great guy to hang out with, and the kind of guy I could pick up the phone and call him right now and he'd take my call. So, Tony, those kind of people are the people that you got to go for. And I say, whether it's shadowing them, getting them to help you, getting them to mentor you, having them join your advisory board without too many obligations. You got to be careful. Don't pin them down to, I need you for 5 board meetings and this and that. I just need you to help out a little bit type of thing, but give me some good advice.
One of the things that we talked about, what you have coming up is the Shark Retreat, which is actually, this is a Tampa-based podcast, and it's happening in St. Petersburg. Could you tell us a little bit about the Shark Retreat?
Yes. Thank you, Kevin. So, I've been an entrepreneur for 50 years, and I've been in the business of launching products for 45 plus years. And we've learned quite a few things. Okay. We've made a lot of mistakes. And so people, and, being a shark on Shark Tank, people would pitch and look for money or look for, the funny thing is, I would not do a deal on the show and just say, I'm out. It's, because we had to do so many deals and there's only so much money to invest. People would call me after the show. Kevin, look, of all the sharks, you're the one I want because you're the product guy. I know you didn't want to invest. I'll give you equity and you don't have to put up a dime, and you get 20% of my company just to be part of it and give us your advice and wisdom and help us raise money. So we started taking some equities along the way from people that said, you don't have to write the check. Now, some of them, we had to write a check to keep them alive. But the bottom line is that, we said, you know what? People, there's 200,000 people a year that apply to get on Shark Tank, and Shark Tank is in its 17th season. Okay. So now 200,000 people apply. They only take 200. So there's 199,800 people that have no place to go.
Well over 1 million people in the last, season.
So where do they go? They go to the internet and they say, well, that shark, Kevin Harrington's a product guy. I wonder if he would be interested. So we get thousands of inquiries a month from people every month for the last 17 years. We've had this huge database of people that are looking for help. So we said, you know what? Let's invite them to an event where they can come hang with a shark. They can pitch us. They can talk to us. They can meet our investors. So we bring investors. We bring digital marketers. We bring people from Home Shopping Network, from QVC. We're going to show you how to get into, get on the shopping channels, to get into catalog distribution, how to go international. By the way, there's something new today called Steals and Deals, where you put your product on the television networks and you blow $1 million worth of product, And so we've got relationships with all those guys. So we have a very robust training it's a 2-day training, January 28th, 29th in downtown St. Petersburg. And it's almost, it's a couple $100 to go, just because if you're not willing to invest a couple $100, we don't want to meet with you. Okay. Because we're going to spend a lot of quality time with you. And so, because it's not the money that we need. It's just the commitment of showing good faith because the people that are coming for free, they're the ones that are going to be bothering you all day long. It's the people that understand, hey, let me put a couple $100 into my future and meet a shark. I'm there for 2 days. We huddle, we take the pitches, we do all kinds of great stuff. We've invested in dozens of companies out of these events, and gotten involved in many, many great projects. In fact, Celsius, back to the story of Celsius, this came about in almost from this kind of an event, but it was somebody that wanted somebody to join their board that had, some kind of branding. And so, that's how we get involved in deals. And we think we have our next Celsius already. I can't talk about it on this podcast, but we'll share those details at the St. Pete event. But I guarantee you this, we had an event in Nashville just recently, a few weeks ago, had 250 people there. We're expecting between 250, 300, 350 maybe at the St. Pete event. There's going to be 10 companies that are going to come out of that event that we're going to have a equity relationship with, whether it be us investing or getting involved in equity in some fashion. We're looking to take a bunch of guys to the next level.
Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Well, we will have all of those details in the description below in this episode. We're going to have Kevin's contact details for what do you prefer, Instagram and things like that? Where would you prefer? Obviously, you're a couple of your books as well. Yeah.
Bigbrandventures.com.
Okay.
With an S, bigbrandventures.com, kevinharrington.tv. They can get me the Real Kevin Harrington on Instagram. However they want to get to me, they'll get, we've got some free courses they can download for free and things like that. I'll tell you what, for special guests of yours, Kevin, I have a book. It's called How to Become a Key Person of Influence. And there's a 7-step process and in your industry. How, in other words, if you're a realtor, how do you become the realtor that the banks call when they have a foreclosure, right? Or that somebody goes to the internet and they say, this is the guy. And by the way, you're Kevin the lawyer, right? Yeah. You're branding yourself. I see your truck. So I see you're doing an awesome job. And so that's what you got to do. But my book spells out how to do that in 7 steps. And we're going to give it away absolutely free to everyone listening to this podcast right now. So you'll put a link on there for them. It's KPI / something or other, but you'll have the link for those listening, and love for them to get that book, check it out, because they will. It's an unbelievable book that has been a bestseller for about 10 years now.
Incredible. Well, we're going to make sure that is linked below for all of our listeners. I can't thank you enough, man, for coming on. Absolutely incredible insight. I know your Shark Retreat event is going to go amazing, as it has all the other events. Make sure, again, you follow Kevin on Instagram. Check out his big brand ventures website, kevinharrington.tv. We'll have all the contact information. As always, make sure you like and subscribe. We're out, guys. Absolutely incredible.
Hey, buddy.
Thanks again. Appreciate you.
2 Kevins. We did it.
We did it.
2 thumbs up.
We did it. Thanks, guys.
All right. Take care.